Good morning and welcome to the Foggy Dew. This is Colin. Well, gang, I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend with their families, and anyone that's a mother, I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day. I love Mother's Day is a great day. It's just nice to appreciate all the women in our lives. So again, I hope everyone had a nice time with their families. So I wanted to go ahead and dive into the content of the show. I got a ton of stuff to get through. I wanted to make a quick note before I got in kind of the main content of the show today. And I guess the easiest place for me to start with this is that when that whole Minnesota fraud deal dropped, I guess that was like 4 months ago, I had made the comment, like, don't be surprised if that's everywhere. Everywhere. Scammers don't like follow geographic boundaries. These scammers operate all over the place. They're going to operate in every state, red or blue. They don't really care. Criminals don't really care about maps. So I saw this over the weekend and I didn't laugh out loud, but kind of I'm like, here we go. So here's the state of North Carolina over the weekend. And for full disclosure, North Carolina is red. They voted red in the last presidential cycle. A lot of the legislature is red. Well, the state auditor of North Carolina is a guy named Dave Boliak. Here's Boliak reporting a 47,000% increase in autism therapy billings. 40, you heard that, not 47, not 470, 47,000% increase in autism therapy billings. 47,000%. That's a spicy meatball. The numbers here are astronomical. So North Carolina, the state of North Carolina in a 5-year period went from 1.6 million in autism billing to, are you ready for this? 660 million. 1.6 million escalated to 660 million. Man, that's a lot of autism. Boliak said the auditor guy, Boliak, said that the issue is the system itself. And when he's talking about the system, he's meaning the same codes are submitted 3 times by an independent provider. And the system doesn't catch that. One of the other contributing factors, according to the state auditor, apparently is lax oversight. You think? Lax oversight by a Democrat-controlled Department of Health and Human Services in the state of North Carolina. And I have bad news for the innocent, humble taxpayers state of North Carolina. The projections for next year are ballooning even more. So this Boliak guy is estimating that it's going to go from 660 million to 842 million. Look, the exponential growth here, if anything, should be flagged by the legislature. How is there not a tripwire there to catch this? You're talking about going from 1.6 million in like a 1.6 million in a 5 or 6 year period to 842 million? And nobody noticed? No, nobody's paying attention to that. 47,000% increase in spending in a budget line item by our government is totally missed. I mean, is anybody surprised why the colonists threw the tea into the harbor? I mean, I'm done paying taxes, man. I think anybody, look, red or blue, the government doesn't need any more money. They need to go away. That's obscene. It's totally obscene. And I guess when I'm reading this thing and you have a 47,000% increase, yep, we totally don't need Doge. What a great conclusion to draw. And I guess good news regarding this whole situation, I think that there's such a microscope on this now. I think the internet, social media gives people better access, or I guess not better access, but better visibility into what state and local governments are doing. People are furious. It's like the Festus data center stuff. It's like so many things. Look at Minnesota. The minute eyeballs go onto this, things start to change. So I guess my point in saying that is that fraud is not limited to blue states. It's not limited to red states. It's everywhere. Silver lining, this is all going to get fixed because there's too many people watching this now. And I think it's obvious. This isn't a red commentary. It's not a blue commentary. This is a universal problem with our government. And I guess congratulations to Nick Shirley, a kid with a cell phone camera. Nick Shirley started a snowball down the hill. And I called it a long time ago. I'm sure every single red state has fraud like this. There's not one state that's running like a Swiss watch. And what you can sleep easy on is that absolutely every single blue state is just riddled with fraud. And anytime I look at this stuff and I see this like crazy amount of fraud going on in these states, it just immediately begs the question in my mind. And that question would be, if the fraud is this bad, meaning the theft of our tax money by the government, the bilking of the taxpayer, if this is occurring all over the place, how bad is voter fraud? How bad is voter fraud? You've got a 47,000% increase in the state of North Carolina. You mean to tell me that the elections are just running like a top? The idea, the contention that voting is secure is a totally laughable proposition to anybody being objective. If you're asleep at the switch for a 47,000% increase in autism billing, I'm hard pressed to believe that voting is held honestly. 47,000% in North Carolina. Red states, blue states. Government is the problem. No accountability is the problem. Wake me up when somebody gets thrown into leg irons out of North Carolina. That is just a crazy number. So I just wanted to pass it along. I thought it was so nuts. Trust me, I'll be watching all this stuff with the fraud. I think it's fascinating. So switching gears, I'm still not going to get over that. I have like this, like 50% of the audience likes switching gears and 50% of it's like, hey, you need to knock it off. I'm a man of the people. I'm trying to figure things out. So for now, it's switching gears. But I've spent a lot of airtime talking about Virginia. And lately, I think a lot of oxygen in domestic politics has been sucked up by what's going on in Virginia, the Virginia redistricting effort. And I would imagine more than a few folks have tuned into this episode to get my 2 cents on what occurred. Well, if you go back and listen to what I had said when I gave my initial comments after that vote occurred, when the redistricting vote happened, I mentioned that the actual legislation, the language of the vote itself had like 3 or 4 constitutional questions that eroded its legitimacy. And to be fair, they weren't questions about the constitutionality of the vote. They were more like blatant violations. And to be fair, I didn't think that the Virginia Supreme Court would have a spine. But of course, because this is an important state issue on the congressional representation map, the situation with the redistricting vote in Virginia was obviously fast-tracked to the Virginia Supreme Court. Well, again, there were 3 or 4 constitutional issues regarding that vote as a predicate. Those 3 to 4 constitutional violations were then reviewed by the Virginia Supreme Court on that fast track. And I think everybody pays attention to politics or turns on a newspaper. The Virginia Supreme Court invalidated that vote that occurred. They nuked it. So the first thing you have to draw away from that is that the Virginia Democrat Party and Democrats nationally lost extremely bad here. Really bad, laughably bad. This whole map is going to go back to a 6-5. It's not going to be 10-1 blue. And there's so many parts of this that are just totally fascinating from a political science standpoint. But one little delightful wrinkle is the opinion itself. The opinion itself is totally hilarious. Guess who wrote the decision? Guess who wrote the opinion? A guy named Justice Arthur Kelsey. Well, here's bad news for Democrats that are arguing about the legitimacy of the Virginia Supreme Court. This Kelsey, Justice Kelsey, he was put on the bench by Democrats. Justice Kelsey was appointed by a Democrat governor named Mark Warner. Justice Kelsey was confirmed by every legislative Democrat, every one. In political parlance, that means that this would be an air quotes liberal judge. And that should tell you everything. This whole vote, everything that occurred here, was far beyond the pale. Virginia is a purple state. It's like a 50-50 state. The Virginia Democrat Party rushed this legislation through. They tried to skirt the law. They wanted a 10 blue, 1 red gerrymander. The Virginia Democrat Party and the Democrat Party nationally got absolutely smoked here. To be 1,000% clear, the Virginia Supreme Court did the right thing, 1,000%. If you as a political party want to break 3 to 4 constitutional provisions, then the whole predicate of the vote itself is invalid. It would be invalid. This is like cheating in a baseball game. It's absolutely like cheating in a game and thinking you won. Like for baseball, it would be like, yeah, we corked our bats. All of our players took steroids. The pitchers all used Crisco on the ball. But yeah, and we won the game. So yay, we won. Great. You also cheated every step of the way. So did you really win? The answer is no. And here's Jay Jones. Jay Jones is the Attorney General of Virginia. This guy is the AG of the state of Virginia. He's a lawyer. This quote blew my mind. Here's Jay Jones, the AG of Virginia. Quote, "Today, the Supreme Court of Virginia has chosen to put politics over the rule of law by issuing a ruling that overturns the April 21st special election on redistricting. This decision silences the voices of millions of Virginians who cast their ballots in every corner of the Commonwealth, and it fuels growing fears across our nation about the state of our democracy," end quote. To be fair, he has a point. Jay Jones, the AG of Virginia, has a point in that commentary when he's talking about growing fears across our nation about the state of our democracy. To be fair, the state of democracy is getting bad. But I guess conversely, the state of our republic is getting much better. That's what this guy seems to not understand. This guy's an AG. He's a lawyer, and apparently he's a carnival barker and a rodeo clown. Just as a side note to all of this, the Democrat leadership, when they rushed this thing through the Virginia state legislature, they did not want a judicial review beforehand. They did not want to review the legality of this whole procedure beforehand. There were very serious questions about this whole process, but the Democrat Party in the state of Virginia and nationally did not want to review before they rushed ahead with this. At the Virginia Supreme Court oral arguments, Virginia lawyers conceded this important point. They conceded that, quote, "the people already voted is irrelevant to the merits of the case being considered." They conceded it. So anytime you hear this idea nationally or on mainstream media, well, the people voted for this, that is totally irrelevant to the merits of the case. The lawyers that presented this to the Supreme Court conceded that point. That is a very spicy plot twist. They acknowledge that it's totally invalid. So all the screeching on mainstream media is just buffoonish, clownish behavior, not listening to the actual facts of the case. The Virginia Democrat Party broke all the rules to get a result. They corked their bats in a baseball game. Breaking the rules to win something is invalid. And if you don't believe me, here's the Virginia Supreme Court. Quote, this is from the decision that was released. Quote, "This constitutional violation incurably taints the resulting referendum vote and nullifies its legal efficacy," end quote. This constitutional violation incurably taints the resulting referendum vote and nullifies its legal efficacy. Brilliantly stated. That is absolutely brilliant. Perfectly said. The Supreme Court continued that I read this whole thing. Again, I'm a nerd. I read all this stuff. They continued, quote, "We hold that the legislative process employed to advance this proposal violated Article 7, Section 1 of the Constitution of Virginia. This violation irreparably undermines the integrity of the resulting referendum vote, rendering it null and void." End quote. This violation irreparably undermines the integrity of the resulting referendum vote, rendering it null and void. That is a legal beatdown. The gerrymandered map that the Democrat Party had, this 10 Democrat, 1 Republican vote, is completely nullified. Completely nullified, and the map is going to remain 6 Democrat, 4 Republican. And I guess that's good news for the Republic. But as I had talked about on my initial comments after the vote occurred, I did not think that they were going to overturn it. It was obvious to anybody paying attention that they broke the rules. But I said it before in the episode, I did not think the Virginia Supreme Court would strike it down. And it's interesting when you kind of get into the inside baseball part of it. The Virginia state constitution says any proposal to modify the Constitution must be done by two legislatures separated by an election. It says it in black and white. They didn't do that. The Virginia Democrat Party stuck this proposal in a budget session, then a general session, and there was no election in between those. And even if they did have an election in between a budget session and a general session, the Virginia Constitution says that it must be 2 general sessions, not a budget session. It's not a budget session and a general session. So they violated 2 laws right there. So it's not even one time. They violated the Virginia Constitution twice. And with all the eyeballs on this nationally, these people left the Virginia Supreme Court absolutely no choice. They had no choice but to rule this way. Zero choice. And I guess contrary to what Jay Jones believes, Virginia itself is a republic with a constitution. The state of Virginia has a constitution and a republican form of government under the rule of law. It's not mob rule democracy. You can't just rig a vote and then be like, look, see, we won. And this is the problem broadly. Rules and laws must be followed if we're going to work together. Rules and laws must be followed. But the problem that I have with all this stuff, the Democrat Party in the state of Virginia and the Democrat Party nationally, including guys like Obama, Hakeem Jeffries, Kamala Harris, they all knew that. Spamberger knew it. Gavin Newsom knew it. The Virginia Democrat Party knew it. The DNC, everybody knew it. They knew that what they were doing was wrong. But the problem with it is that these people are absolutely drunk on power. They are totally drunk on power. They're high on their own supply, man. What they did is they saw a lane to steal this state for democracy, whatever that means. They wanted to seize the map. They wanted to seize it. They wanted to capture it, accost it. Legality be damned. This was totally brazen and illegal behavior, and congrats, cheaters, your new map is invalid. Not only is your map invalid, you just angered red nationally. And anger really isn't the right word. These folks in Virginia and nationally in the Democrat Party took their mask off and showed you their true colors. It's not blue. They're in it for themselves. They're in it for their own power. And as always on the Foggy Dew, watch the response. Watch the response. Look at Jay Jones's comments. It tells you everything. Here's the lieutenant governor of the state of Virginia. This is the lieutenant governor of the state of Virginia, Ghazala Hashimi. This is her own words, quote, "Virginia voters made their voices heard and deserve a process that respects the will of the people. At a moment when trust in our democratic institutions is already being tested, unprecedented intervention at this scale raises serious concerns about transparency, end quote. At a moment when trust in our democratic institutions is already being tested. Serious concerns about transparency. Yes, very serious questions about transparency. Transparency. Does she even hear herself? Serious questions about transparency. Kind of like having an invalid election with coded, crafted language. That's not very transparent. She's crying about transparency. I mean, lay off the hash pipe, lady. She's worried about transparency when she just pulled off a totally rigged election. And this is the same group of people that talk about Donald Trump rigging elections. Here's the lead clown, Abigail Spanberger. You know I'm not going to forget about her. Here's Abigail Spanberger. Quote, more than 3 million Virginians cast their ballots in Virginia's redistricting referendum, and the majority of Virginia voters voted to push back against a president who said he is, quote, entitled to more Republican seats in Congress. With a temporary and responsive referendum, they made their voices heard. I am disappointed by the Supreme Court of Virginia's ruling, but my focus as governor will be on ensuring that all voters have the information necessary to make their voices heard this November in the midterm elections, because in those elections, we, the voters, will have the final say. End quote. Dude, she's awesome. That whole commentary gives it away. They rushed to get a result, man. They just wanted the result. They didn't care how the result came. And if I said this before on my initial comment, they wanted to get to a point where it's like, well, the people spoke. The people spoke. 3 million Virginians said they wanted this. Man, that's a canard. That's a canard. And I think it's so interesting listening. Where do they immediately go? Here's Abigail Spanberger. Quote, push back against the president. End quote. Push back against the president. Everything's about Trump. They want everything to be overlaid by Donald Trump. Hitler's making his move. That's what it is. They're creating a boogeyman. The creation of a boogeyman allows the moral cosplay. It's the rebel alliance against Darth Vader. It's framing themselves as this merry-go-lucky band of freedom fighters that are fighting against Hitler. That mental cosplay allows the moral stretching here. It makes the ends justify the means. Well, we broke the law. We understand that, but it's Hitler. Don't you understand? Don't you understand? We can break any law if the goal is defeating Hitler. Who's in charge of who's in charge of the Democrat Party? Kamala Harris in a lot of ways. You think I was going to go through this whole thing and not get into what Kamala Harris said? Here's Kamala Harris. She slithered out from under her rock to chime in on this deal. Here's Kamala Harris, quote, last month in Virginia, the people made their voices heard at the ballot box and voted for new congressional maps. Today, the Virginia Supreme Court ignored the will of the people and overturned those democratically chosen maps. This ruling gives a boost to Donald Trump's effort to rig the 2026 elections and the Republicans' long game to attack voting rights. We are rightfully outraged, but we will not give up. We must continue our fight to restore the power of the people, end quote. Awesome. Awesome. The Virginia Supreme Court ignored the will of the people and overturned the democratically chosen. The Virginia Supreme Court ignored the will of the people. No, they followed the law. The entire predicate of the election was incorrect because you broke the rules to get it in front of the voter. This lady's a lawyer. I guess she's a lawyer. It's hard to tell. Not only was she a lawyer, she was the attorney general. This person, Kamala Harris, is a lawyer. She is an attorney general, and she's a presidential candidate. I love it. The Virginia Supreme Court ignored the will of the people. Man, that is so dense. How could you say that with a straight face? I mean, a better way to say that would be like the Virginia Democrat Party ignored the law and got the result they desired. That would be more appropriate. And the funny thing is, it's always about Trump. It's always about Trump. This ruling gives a boost to Donald Trump's effort to rig the 2026. Where's your proof of that? And I guess, look, I'm not all that bright, but if you break laws to get a vote in front of the voter, like a referendum in front of the voters, if you break the law to get that referendum in front of voters, aren't you rigging the voting process too? Again, a lawyer, an attorney general, she's the most qualified person that ever ran for president, right? And she doesn't understand this? How's that even possible? You want to talk about slithering out from under a rock? Here's Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom slithers out to chime in on with this quote, canceling this guy, Gavin Newsom, quote, canceling elections, silencing free speech, deploying private police against your own citizens. History as a term for Donald Trump's behavior, end quote. Man, that guy's got great peyote. He's got great drugs at a bare minimum. How can the Dew get in on that trend? Mr. Producer, make a note. Can we get in touch with Gavin Newsom's people and find out where he gets his drugs from? I seriously, like, enough. I need to get on that train, man. And he must be on some kind of drugs because I watch videos of that guy lately, man. He waves his hand around like he's casting a spell. I've never seen it's like Bill Gates. They're waving their hand, they're gesticulating all over the place. It's the most unbelievable thing ever. But I mean, these comments are just totally unhinged. There could be a picture of Gavin Newsom next to the word hyperbole in a dictionary. And I guess you would probably need his picture a couple times because I guess there could also be a picture of him next to a reptile. The guy's like a snake person, man. He's literally like a lizard. I don't understand it. He had another great quote that I saw this it was another gem that he had after this one. Here's Gavin Newsom. This is all an X. These people post this stuff like nobody's reading it. Newsom, quote, Confederate states are rushing through rigged maps to erase black districts off the map entirely, quote, end quote. Confederate states rushing rigged maps, erase black districts? Do people use the word guffaw anymore? I mean, I think guffaw is probably the right word. I think that's like a 50s term. You should guffaw at that. Here's Hakeem Jeffries. Again, the response is the best part, guys. Here's Hakeem Jeffries. Quote, throwing the American South back into the Jim Crow era, end quote. Shame on you, man. That's race hustler stuff. Totally ridiculous. He's a race hustler. Here's Hakeem Jeffries more broadly. This is Hakeem Jeffries, quote, over 3 million Virginian citizens cast their votes in a free and fair election, yet the state Supreme Court has chosen to invalidate their voice, disenfranchise them, and violate their due process rights. The decision to overturn an entire election is an unprecedented and undemocratic action that cannot stand. MAGA Republicans have adopted voter suppression as a strategy, as also evidenced by far-right extremists on the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act to open the door for a Jim Crow-like attack on black representation across the American South. This goes on, end quote. Gavin Newsom and Hakeem Jeffries are so disingenuous. Total frauds. They're talking about like this is some kind of race war. They're talking about black and brown people. Here's Hakeem Jeffries in his own words. Gutting the Voting Rights Act to open the door to a Jim Crow-like attack on black representation across the American South. I guess they forgot Winsome Earl Sears. You remember that name, Winsome Earl Sears? Winsome Earl Sears was the black lady running for governor against Abigail Spanberger. Winsome Earl Sears was a black lady. Do you remember who the Democrat Party backed in that deal? Do you remember who they backed in the Virginia governor election? I do. The Democrat Party backed the white lady. They backed Abigail Spanberger. And why would they do that? Why would the Democrat Party do that? Because Winsome Earl Sears is a Republican and a Donald Trump supporter. That's the scam. That is the fly in their ointment. Race, when people like Hakeem Jeffries and Newsom use it, race is only used if it benefits them politically. You draw the race card out of the ether, use your race card, and then put it away again for use down the road when it's politically expedient to you. These people only know one tune. They know one tune and it's out of key. These people will never stop, man. They're in a war. If you look at, I'm going to quote Hakeem. This is Hakeem Jeffries on this thing. This is from his post on X. Quote, "Our fight is not over. We are just getting started," end quote. This whole thing is existential for them. It's the moral cosplay. They're fighting against the evil empire. So what happens here? Virginia Democrats, after the ruling came out by the Virginia Supreme Court, Virginia Democrats immediately asked the Virginia Supreme Court to hold the ruling. They requested a stay. Why? They want to appeal it. Appeal it. That shows you the buffoonery. That shows you the lack of legal understanding. This is a total clown show. They want to appeal it to the United States Supreme Court. When they appealed it, they even spelled Virginia wrong in the appeal. There were spelling mistakes all over it. And I read the briefing. They probably had ChatGPT write it. I just mentioned they want to send this to the Supreme Court. All these lawyers involved, Kamala Harris, Jay Jones, they want to appeal Virginia Supreme Court ruling to the Supreme Court. Sorry, wrong. Any first-year law student could tell you that that is 1,000% a Virginia state law issue. Virginia state law was violated. State law, not federal. The state law was violated and the state Supreme Court ruled on it. Case closed. There's no appeal here to the federal. It's over, guys. The gambit failed. You're out of Uno cards here. And anytime these people talk to you about rigging elections, the gambit by the Virginia Democrat Party to literally rig an election failed. And I just mentioned it a minute ago. Do communists ever stop? No, they never do. Never. Because apparently beyond the Supreme Court appeal, they have another plan brewing. Are you ready for this? The New York Times reported Sunday that there is yet another plan emerging by national Democrats and Virginia Democrats. And this one is my absolute favorite. These people, their plan now is they want all new Virginia Supreme Court justices. They want to wipe the bench clear. So the Democrat Party is talking about lowering the Virginia justices' mandatory retirement age. Mandatory retirement on the bench for the Virginia Supreme Court currently is 75 years old, meaning when you hit 75, you're automatically forced to retire. What they're talking about now is lowering the mandatory retirement age in the state of Virginia for Supreme Court justices to 54 years or less. And just if you're curious, the current ages of the people on the bench, 70 years old, 69 years old, 67 years old, 64 years old, 61, 56, 54. So in layman's terms, if the mandatory retirement age was lowered to 54, absolutely 100% of the justices on the Virginia Supreme Court would be forced to retire. All 7 justices would be removed from the bench, all of them. And then what would happen is if they did that and they got rid of all these people, that would then require the Virginia Democrat majority in the legislature to appoint a whole new Virginia Supreme Court. So they don't like the results, so they're just going to go get new judges. And then when they have their the judges that think correctly, meaning the way that they want them, the biggest activists that ever were, the Virginia Democrat Party can then just ram through whatever they want. This is awesome. Please do it. The Democrat Party in the state of Virginia broke the law to have an illegal election, and now they want to remove the entire Supreme Court bench in the state of Virginia. Please do it. Please do it. Because if that ever went through, and it never would, that would destroy the Virginia Supreme Court. Any legitimacy immediately is gone. You would have 7 partisan charlatans on the bench at that point. All legitimacy of the court is gone. Any legislator doing that would be stained forever. That action, if they did it, would be universally condemned. They don't care. If that ever happened, you want to talk about universal condemnation. If that occurred, the entire United States would come to a grinding halt. It'd be a full stop in the republic. We'd be like, you would have a real constitutional crisis. Not a fake one, not a hyperbole one. You would have a real constitutional crisis. Because that action would go well beyond gerrymandering a map. That would be some type of like Fort Sumter moment. Like a kickoff to a civil war. There would have to be a full stop moment. But this is the position they're in. They're openly discussing this. They had a meeting where this was openly being discussed to the point where the New York Times got a hold of it and published it. This is the craziest situation I've ever seen coming from people that are stamping their foot about democracy, Donald Trump rigging elections, rule of law, all the other stuff. It's totally stunning. So what happens next? And I guess that's really the question. Because if you look at the whole gerrymandered scope here, I think it's like plus 11 red nationally. And I think by the end of this, with all the states involved, meaning across the whole map congressionally, I think it could be up to plus 17 red with the gerrymandering. And that's the state gerrymandering. That plus 11, plus 17 doesn't even get you into the Voting Rights Act seats. Which, if you're looking at this and being objective, this shift for red congressionally for 2026 is totally in flight. And what are we, 6 months out or something like 4 or 5 months out? If this snowball continues, the GOP, the red, they're going to pull way ahead in midterm projections. And I guess, again, talking about what happens next, you would have the congressional balance shifting. You have Donald Trump's executive order on mail-in voting still in flight. The Democrat Party is staring on the barrel of the 2030 census. That is a bomb for the party. That's a terminal moment for the Democrat Party nationally. You've got a totally weak field for the Democrats in 2028. You've got a clown car of reptiles and Kamala Harris, Newsom, Hillary, AOC, Mark Kelly, Mark Cuban. But if you look at all this stuff, I think that this situation in Virginia was probably the most delegitimizing thing to a national party I've ever seen. Because the Democrat Party nationally is structurally finished. They can't sit there and screech January 6th anymore. They are openly defying the rule of law. They're talking about replacing an entire state Supreme Court to get the result that they want. The Democrat Party for the last 10 years, their entire mantra has been get Donald Trump. And in this zeal to get rid of Trump and demonize Trump as the next Hitler, there's no vision, there's no agenda. And I just mentioned it a minute ago, they want to fundamentally change the system from a republic to a democracy. This is absolutely corrupt behavior, start to finish, by this party. And I talked about it at the beginning. Look at the state fraud. Look at all the money that's being stolen from the taxpayers in blue states. Look at what they just did in Virginia. Look at them importing 30 million illegals. The Democrat Party across the U.S. is totally broke. All the USAID money's gone. All their NGO money is gone. They can't cheat enough to win anymore. And what you're seeing is their entire infrastructure, this entire game that they've set up, is getting demolished. It's getting demolished. Because you know what? Republicans are actually fighting back. They realize that if they didn't fight back, these people in the Democrat Party, these communist socialists in the Democrat Party, would take over and we'd go to a single party state. So I'll kind of wrap this up. I thought this is the one last point I wanted to make on this. Do you have any idea how much money the Democrat Party spent on this Virginia redistricting deal? This is from the party that talks to you about how they care about the little guy and they want to get money back to mom and dad, household issues. They spent $80 million on this. The Democrat Party in the state of Virginia spent $80 million on this whole redistricting thing. They spent $80 million to fail flat on their face. And it's really not just the 80 million. I mean, the 80, okay, whatever. To me, the takeaway from this is the political capital. It's destroying their own legitimacy. These folks have torched themselves. They burned all their credibility. It's these people I'm quoting, the Kamala Harrises, the Hakeem Jeffries, the Spambergers, the Obamas. These people dug their own hole. They burned $80 million on a disaster. I mean, it is a full-blown disaster. This would make the Hindenburg blush. Just an absolutely stunning scene coming out of Virginia. I laughed all day about it, made my weekend great. But these people are getting everything that they deserve. And trust me, I'll be watching the whole thing. Okay, I guess good news and bad news moving forward. I have a ton of content that I wrote over the weekend, but I'm looking at my timer right now and I'm almost at 45 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode, but I guess the good news is I'll have more episodes coming out this week because I already have the content written. So I'll go ahead and wrap the show up. Sorry I spent so much time bloviating about Virginia. I just think this is going to be one of the most seismic events that's happened in U.S. politics domestically in a long, long time. And I think it deserves the full time. So anyway, if you like the show, please go ahead and tell a friend about it. If you would, please follow us on Spotify. You can also follow us on Instagram at Foggy Dew Daily. If you have questions for the show, please go ahead and email us at foggydew95@gmail.com. But in the meantime, I'd ask you to say a prayer, ask questions, and stay vigilant. This is the Foggy Dew signing off.